My parents forced me to finance my sister's luxury wedding. While I struggled to pay rent, I walked away and left them begging for help. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who cleaned up everyone else's messes, silently, without complaint. Growing up, my younger sister Lily was the golden child. She got the praise, the attention, the encouragement. Every time she brought home a decent grade or performed in a school play, my parents clapped louder than I ever did when I hit a scholarship or worked late to fund my first car. Their eyes sparkled for her, while mine seemed invisible. I learned early that my achievements were quietly expected, never celebrated. From a young age, I built financial independence. I worked part-time jobs after school, picked up weekends at the grocery store, and started saving meticulously. By the time I hit my 20s, I was living modestly, barely touching my savings, paying rent, buying groceries, all while Lily got designer sneakers, concert tickets, and weekend trips with friends. The imbalance didn't escape me, but I convinced myself this was just family life. Then came the small expenses. A broken phone screen here, an extra art class there, and somehow it always landed on me. "You have a steady job," my mom would say with a smile. "It's nothing, just help Lily out." Nothing. It was slowly eating me alive, but I swallowed the frustration, rationalizing it as my responsibility, my duty to keep peace. And yet, even in my quiet resentment, a small warning bell nagged in the back of my mind. Something felt off about how easily they leaned on me, how unquestioningly they assumed my support. I couldn't see it clearly yet, but I had a creeping suspicion that my loyalty and sacrifices were laying the groundwork for something I might regret. Every time I handed over my hard-earned money for the sake of family, I felt a mixture of pride and unease, like I was doing the right thing, but at a cost I couldn't yet measure. And looking back now, I realized that cost was about to skyrocket in ways I never imagined. It started with a text that felt like a punch to the gut. "Guess what? I'm engaged." Lily's excitement practically radiated off the screen. I forced a smile, trying to match her joy, but a sinking feeling settled in my chest. I'd been bracing myself for this moment, though I didn't know why. When my parents called that evening, their enthusiasm was deafening. "Isn't this wonderful?" my mom gushed. "We need to start planning a proper wedding for Lily. She deserves the best." My stomach dropped as my dad added, almost casually, "And you'll help, of course, you have the means now." My hands went cold. My means barely covered rent and bills, let alone a luxury wedding. I tried to protest. "Mom, Dad. I'm barely keeping up with my own finances. I can't cover something that big." They laughed, almost dismissively. "Oh, don't worry, it's just a family obligation. You're the responsible one, we can count on you." Obligation. That word stung worse than any insult. They weren't asking, they were expecting. Lily had no idea how precarious my situation was. She kept talking about a destination venue, designer dresses, a live band, and a fancy reception hall. I forced a nod, all while my mind raced. How could they be so blind, or maybe they weren't blind at all? Maybe this was just what they always expected from me, silent compliance. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, the hum of the heater filling the silence, and wondered how I'd been roped into footing a bill that would crush me financially. Every red flag I'd ignored over the years, the little favors, the loans, the small expenses, suddenly screamed in my head. And yet, despite the creeping dread, I knew this was only the beginning. How far would they push me? And how much was I willing to give before I finally said enough? Over the next few weeks, the wedding planning became a minefield. Every conversation with my parents left me feeling smaller, like my own needs didn't exist. "It's just a few more expenses," my mom would say, her voice syrupy sweet, but I could feel the expectation dangling over me like a guillotine. Even minor things, Lily's bridesmaids' dresses, an extra rehearsal dinner, a photo shoot, somehow landed squarely on my shoulders. I tried to set limits. I can help, but I can't cover everything. Maybe we split some costs. Oh, don't be silly, my dad replied, his tone sharper than usual. You have a steady income, and Lily deserves the best. You'll handle it. That's what family does. I clenched my fists, pretending the irritation wasn't gnawing at my insides. Family obligation, they called it. Manipulation, I started thinking. Even Lily seemed oblivious, or maybe she just didn't care. She casually mentioned another designer for the wedding cake, one I knew cost nearly my entire month's rent. She laughed about it, completely unbothered, and I forced a smile while my heart sank. My apartment felt smaller than ever, cluttered with bills, receipts, and the quiet panic that came with realizing I was being taken for granted. Friends tried to warn me. Dude, they're exploiting you, one said, shaking his head. This isn't just helping, it's feeding their entitlement. I nodded politely, pretending to understand, but I felt trapped in a loop I couldn't see a way out of. The guilt was heavy, a constant drumbeat reminding me that refusing wasn't an option, or so my family made me believe. Late at night, lying on the couch as the hum of the city seeped through my cracked window, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about control, manipulation, and my own sanity. And deep down, I had a sinking suspicion that the wedding wasn't the end of this exploitation, it was only the beginning. Eventually, I caved. I told myself it was for peace, for family, for Lily's happiness. Fine, I said, swallowing the knot of frustration in my throat. I'll cover some of it. I didn't realize how much of myself I was sacrificing until the first payment left my account, leaving me scraping by for rent and groceries. My apartment suddenly felt colder, emptier, like a cage I'd willingly locked myself into. I sold a few things I didn't need, my old gaming console, some clothes, even a guitar I hadn't played in months, just to make room for this fantasy wedding. My nights were consumed with extra shifts, late emails, and side gigs, while my parents discussed flower arrangements and table linens as if I wasn't juggling survival. They never asked how I was doing, they never thanked me. Their eyes were fixed firmly on Lily, glowing with pride, while I became a background fixture, quietly expected to provide. Lily, of course, didn't notice or care about my sacrifices. She fussed over napkin folds, seating charts, and which designer gown she preferred. Her excitement was intoxicating, and I tried to share in it, but every compliment she received felt like a dagger, another reminder of how invisible my struggles were. Occasionally, my friends called. Are you serious? You're going to bankrupt yourself for her. They didn't understand, I didn't even fully understand myself. I was caught in the compulsion to be the responsible one, to keep the family machine running, even when it ground me down. One night, sitting at my tiny kitchen table surrounded by bills, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, I felt the first real spark of doubt. I had agreed to help, yes, but at what cost? And as I stared at my dwindling bank account, I realized something chilling, this wedding was slowly consuming me, and my family didn't even see it. And that's when I first thought, maybe this isn't just about generosity anymore. Maybe it's about control. Weeks turned into months, and the requests never stopped. Every week, my parents called with some new emergency for the wedding, a last-minute cake upgrade, a floral arrangement that had gone over budget, a lighting package that suddenly had to be perfect. Each one felt heavier than the last, like I was carrying a backpack filled with bricks I couldn't set down. I tried reasoning. Mom, Dad, I can't keep covering everything. My rent is due, and I'm behind on groceries. You'll figure it out, my dad said, voice firm. You're the responsible one. Lily deserves this. You're being ridiculous, my mom added. She's your sister, you owe her this. Family first. I felt trapped. No matter what I said, the blame somehow bounced back onto me. My sacrifices, late nights, extra shifts, side gigs, were invisible, except for when they became convenient leverage to guilt me into paying even more. Lily, meanwhile, floated above it all in a bubble of excitement and entitlement. She never asked how I was doing, never noticed the stress etched into my face, the frayed edges of my patience. One evening, she laughed about yet another expensive add-on. Can't wait to have the rose petal aisle. You're covering it, right? My blood ran cold. She didn't even pause to think, didn't even ask, she assumed. Late at night, I lay awake, the city lights through my window casting jagged shadows across my walls, wondering how I had become the family ATM. Friends tried to intervene, warning me that this wasn't helping anyone, it was exploitation disguised as obligation. And deep down, I started to feel it, the sting of betrayal. Not from Lily alone, but from my parents, the people I trusted most, the ones who were supposed to support me. I realized that this wasn't a request anymore. It was an expectation. And every day, the pressure mounted, squeezing the last bit of patience and sanity I had left. I didn't yet know how far they would push me, but I had a sinking feeling it was about to get worse. It hit me like a freight train one afternoon when I logged into my bank account to check my payments. I noticed a string of transactions for wedding-related loans I hadn't agreed to. Confused, I called my mom. Mom, why are there charges here for Lily's dress and some floral package I didn't approve? Oh, that? Don't worry about it, she said, voice light as if brushing off dust. Lily just needed a little extra help. It's nothing, you'll handle it, right? It was nothing. Nothing cost thousands, and yet suddenly it was all my responsibility. My chest tightened, my palms sweaty. They hadn't just expected me to pay, they had assumed I would, without a word, and worse, Lily had been secretly racking up loans behind the scenes. She wasn't just entitled, she was deliberately reckless, and my parents were enabling it. I felt a burning mixture of anger and betrayal. Every late night, every skipped meal, every side gig to make ends meet, it was invisible. They'd used me as a financial safety net while pretending it was all my choice, all my duty, all my family responsibility. That night, lying on my worn couch as the neon city lights flickered through the blinds, I couldn't stop thinking about how I'd been played. I realized that my parents weren't just blind to my sacrifices, they were actively exploiting them. And Lily, she didn't even notice I existed outside of my wallet. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel it fully, betrayal. A raw, aching betrayal that cut deeper than any financial worry. The people I trusted most, my own family, had been manipulating me for their gain, and now the wedding, which I thought was just an extravagant inconvenience, had become a weapon pointed straight at me. I stared at the ceiling, heart hammering, and wondered, how much worse could this get? And for the first time, I questioned whether I could survive it without completely losing myself. By the time the final payment for Lily's latest extravagance hit my account, I was gasping for air. My rent was overdue. My bank account was near empty. I had maxed out credit cards I didn't want to touch, and every dollar I earned seemed to vanish instantly into the endless pit of their expectations. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, head in my hands, the fluorescent glow of my laptop illuminating my exhaustion. A stack of bills and late notices stared back at me. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the heater, but inside, my mind was screaming. How did it come to this? How had I become a servant to my own family, my efforts feeding someone else's fantasy? My parents didn't see me struggling. They saw only the wedding's progress. You've done so much already, my mom said over the phone, voice saccharine but sharp. We're counting on you for the next part too. I could barely form words, my voice cracking. I can't. I literally don't have anything left. I'm barely surviving. Even Lily's responses were infuriatingly cheerful. Oh, don't worry. You'll figure it out, right? Her oblivion cut deeper than the financial stress. I felt invisible, used, and utterly alone. The resentment, guilt, and despair swirled into a choking fog. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling above me, and realized something terrifying. If I kept going like this, I wouldn't just be broke, I'd be broken. I had hit the absolute bottom, and it wasn't just money. It was my dignity, my sanity, my faith in my family. For the first time, I let myself imagine walking away. Just leaving it all behind. But that thought, as liberating as it felt, was terrifying too. Could I do it? Could I finally say no, and survive the fallout that was bound to come? That night, staring at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, I saw a man I barely recognized. Dark circles under my eyes, tense jaw, shoulders slumped under invisible weight. I realized I'd been carrying everyone else's life on my back while mine slowly unraveled. And then, something clicked. Enough was enough. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who only saw me as a wallet, a tool, a convenience. The next morning, I drafted the hardest email I'd ever written. I can no longer contribute to Lily's wedding, I typed, my hands trembling. I have my own responsibilities. I'm done paying for things I can't afford, and I will not be guilt into it anymore. I paused, heart hammering, fingers hovering over the send button. What would they say? Would they even listen? When I hit send, there was silence. Too soon to tell, but a rush of liberation hit me like icy water. For the first time in years, I wasn't obeying obligation or fear. I was obeying myself. That afternoon, my phone rang. Predictably, it was my mom, voice sharp but coated in syrup. You can't just do this. Lily's entire wedding depends on you. I've done everything I can, I said firmly, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm done. I need to take care of my own life now. Lily tried to text, then call. I didn't answer. She sent pictures of venues, gowns, even the cake, but I ignored them all. The weight I had carried for so long started to lift, replaced with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. But I knew this was only the beginning. My parents and sister wouldn't take this quietly. The real challenge, their reactions, their desperation, their manipulation, was waiting just over the horizon. And I had to be ready. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. Within a week of my decision, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents called constantly, switching between pleading, guilt-tripping, and outright anger. Please, you can't leave us hanging. Lily's wedding, everything's falling apart, my mom's voice trembled, and I could almost hear the forced calm in my dad's tone as he added, you have to help, you're the only one who can fix this. Even Lily finally realized she couldn't manipulate the situation anymore. She sent frantic texts, I can't believe you're actually doing this. Mom and Dad said you had to help. I ignored them, watching the desperation escalate in real time. Social media posts from extended family started popping up, subtle nudges, passive-aggressive comments about responsibility and family unity. The best part? The first flicker of satisfaction when I realized the wedding wasn't going to proceed smoothly without my contributions. Vendors began calling my parents, invoices piled up, and panic seeped into every conversation. I could hear the strain in their voices when they tried to brainstorm alternatives, desperately looking for someone else to fill the hole I left. It was surreal to witness. For years, I'd been invisible, my sacrifices assumed, my efforts expected. And now, as the ones who had leaned on me for so long started to crumble, I felt a quiet, almost guilty sort of pride. Not that I enjoyed their panic, but for the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. Sitting back on my couch, letting the news sink in, I realized something, this wasn't just about finances anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally being seen. And as their desperation grew louder and more frantic, I knew that things were only going to get more chaotic, and more satisfying, from here. The wedding, once a glittering dream in Lily's eyes, quickly turned into a nightmare for my parents. Vendors called incessantly, demanding payment. Florists threatened to cancel, the caterer refused to show without a deposit, and the venue manager left messages that grew increasingly frustrated. Every call, every email, was another reminder that my absence, my refusal, had real consequences. My parents were frantic. My mom called, voice trembling, "We don't know what to do. Please, you have to help us, this is a disaster." "I've done all I can," I said calmly, for the first time feeling untouchable. "I'm not paying anymore." My dad tried reasoning, pleading, guilt-tripping. It bounced off like water off stone. He didn't understand that the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the family ATM. Lily's panic was almost comical from the outside. Texts flew at all hours, "You promised. How could you leave me like this? Mom said you're ruining everything." Her entitlement clashed violently with the reality that she had no safety net. For the first time, she realized her golden child privileges weren't limitless. I sat back, listening to the chaos unfold, feeling a mix of relief and quiet vindication. The weight that had pressed on me for years, the expectation, the guilt, the financial strain, was finally lifting. I wasn't the one scrambling, panicking, or begging anymore. And as the phone calls continued, with my parents' desperation intensifying by the hour, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. I had finally reclaimed it, and the chaos my refusal unleashed wasn't cruel, it was just the natural consequence of their long-standing entitlement. But even as satisfaction coursed through me, I knew this wasn't over. They would find ways to push, to guilt, to manipulate. And I had to stay steady, ready for the final moments that would truly cement my independence and reclaim my life. After weeks of relentless calls, texts, and frantic emails from my parents and Lily, I finally felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. I had drawn a line, and for the first time, they respected it, begrudgingly, of course. I moved into a slightly larger apartment, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. I set up my bills, automated my savings, and felt a strange thrill just knowing that every dollar I earned stayed with me. When my parents tried to reach out again, I held firm. "I'm done," I said once, calmly, and then let my silence do the rest. Lily sent frantic messages about vendors and dresses, but I didn't respond. For the first time, I was untouchable. Not because I had power over them, but because I had power over myself. Friends noticed the change immediately. "You look lighter," one said, a knowing smile on their face. "Like you finally stopped carrying everyone else's weight." And they were right. The anxiety that had clawed at me for years was dissipating, replaced with clarity and control. I had learned, painfully, that respect and boundaries mattered more than blind obedience. Every day that passed without being manipulated reinforced my independence. I realized I didn't need to justify my choices to anyone, not my parents, not Lily, not even myself. My sacrifices had been weaponized against me for years, but now, my refusal to participate in their entitlement was itself a statement, louder than any argument, more powerful than any lecture. And while my parents and sister struggled to patch the holes I refused to fill, I felt something they could never take: peace. For the first time in my life, I had put myself first, and it felt devastatingly liberating. But I knew the final chapter was still ahead. The lessons, the fallout, the satisfaction of seeing the consequences land squarely where they belonged, those moments were coming next, and I was ready. Months later, the dust had settled, and my parents were still scrambling. Calls came occasionally, tentative and pleading, trying to thread the needle between guilt and desperation. "We're really struggling, maybe you could help just a little," my mom's voice trembled. I listened once, then set the phone down. Silence became my most powerful tool. Lily's life, once a bubble of entitlement and indulgence, was cracking. Vendors hadn't been paid on time, social media photos showed the wedding chaos, and extended family murmured behind the scenes. She finally realized that golden child status didn't protect her from consequences. For the first time, she had to reckon with her actions, and the absence of the brother who had quietly carried her life on his back. I focused on myself. I rebuilt my savings, decorated my apartment the way I liked, cooked meals I enjoyed, and spent weekends doing things that filled me, not obligated me. I laughed freely again, without the heavy cloud of responsibility pressing on me. Friends noticed the change instantly. I carried myself differently, lighter, unburdened, untouchable. And in that quiet, I understood something profound. The most satisfying revenge isn't confrontation or yelling, it's walking away, watching the chaos unfold without interference, and reclaiming your life. My parents and Lily had used me for years, but now the tables were turned. They were the ones pleading, panicking, and facing the consequences, while I thrived in freedom and peace. I didn't gloat. I didn't send warnings or reminders. I just lived. And every time I reflected on the ordeal, a quiet smile crossed my face. The lesson was clear: boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to say no can be more devastating, and more liberating, than any confrontation. Finally, I was free.